Alrighty, very exciting. We're on chapter 24 of Outlier by Lisa Beeson. And we just left off of Ari having kicked a missile into smithereens, and she damn near died, but she's chosen to live, and now we're back. As Ari rose up into consciousness, even before she opened her eyes, she realized that she felt no pain. It was gone. How long have I been unconscious? Then she was aware of Cam's energy surrounding her and giving her strength. He was okay and healthy. She was relieved to know that she had managed to save them. His tall, strong body was protectively curled around her, with his forehead pressed against her temple. One arm was under her neck, and the other pulling her in close, like he was trying to cocoon himself around her to keep her safe. She heard him whispering, "Transa umbra elu prestat," over and over like a mantra. Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah. Her eyes fluttered open, and when they managed to focus, she saw that she was lying in a hospital bed. They were in a strange room that reminded her of an old-fashioned infirmary, but equipped with high-tech medical equipment, and there were 2 empty beds to her left. Dusty beams of light shone down from high windows on the wall behind her. She was wearing a hospital gown, and there was an IV needle attached to the back of her left hand. Her eyes followed the line of the tube that connected to a bag of clear fluid, and saw that her arm was crisscrossed with scars that were shiny and pink with newly healed skin. She figured that those must be from when she busted through the back window of the Cadillac. Cam's body was covering her whole right side, so she couldn't see the full extent of the damage. "Cam," she croaked, her voice hoarse from disuse. Cam's head jerked up in surprise, and he quickly slid his arm out from behind her neck and leaned on his elbow so he could look down at her. His eyes filled with tears that overflowed and fell into her hair. The look of raw joy and relief on his face when he realized she was really awake and she hadn't left him was heartbreaking. He leaned down and kissed her forehead as he swallowed back a sob, which made her break into tears herself. She felt horrible that she had put him through so much torment, but so grateful that he loved her that much. Then he pulled back to look at her again. "It's so good to see those beautiful blues," he said tenderly, and then his face broke into an impish grin. "But I swear, if you almost die on me one more time..." They both broke out in thick, tearful chuckles that released some of the emotional tension. Cam wiped at his eyes and then wiped hers away with his thumb. "Where are we?" she asked. After a bracing sigh, he said, "America's top hat. The land of hockey, maple syrup, and bacon that's really ham," he said with a wry smirk. "Canada? But that means..." Her body tensed with the realization as she tried to get up, but Cam's weight held her down. "Shh, it's okay." He brushed her hair back soothingly. "You were right. Alvaro was trying to warn you. He just did a really sucky job of it. He's a seer, but his visions are disjointed and aren't very clear. He didn't know exactly how you'd get hurt. He just knew about when and where it was going to happen. So he, the doc, and Randall were there waiting for us on that street corner." Which was good because his voice choked up with emotion and his eyes began to fill up with tears again as he slowly shook his head. "It was bad, Ari. Really bad. There was so much blood and everyone thought you were dead, but I wouldn't let them give up on you." "You're the reason I came back," she wanted to say, but things were getting a little too intense and overwhelming between them. So she chickened out and decided to ask instead, "Is the doc the old progeny guy?" She remembered how he had seemed to heal Alvaro's wrist. He nodded. "His real name is Dr. Azza Solomon. He's an actual doctor and a powerful healer. But your wounds were so bad that even he wouldn't have been able to save you if you hadn't amped him." "How could I have amped him if I was unconscious?" she asked, confused. "He said that it must have been a reflex, like when your body knows when to produce certain hormones like adrenaline or cortisol. Your body did what it needed to survive." How did we get here? How long have I been out? It's all kind of a blur now, but when everyone realized what had happened, Kale sifted you to the back of the Cadillac where the doc could heal you, while Reed drove us all out of the city to the airfield. They had to dodge the cops and take out a couple more suit sedans on the way, but we managed to get there, and we got in Kale's jet and flew here to Toronto. You've been unconscious for about 3 days. I haven't really had a chance to check the place out yet. I've been here the whole time with you. I couldn't stand the thought of you waking up alone. Thanks, Cam, she said, smiling gratefully up at him. Where's Kale? She tried to locate his energy but couldn't find him. Cam's eyes hardened, and he grimaced in disgust. That asshat took off as soon as he dumped us here. He's long gone, Ari. What? She breathed out incredulously. Ari's mind was reeling. Did he already leave for Esseret? Kale wouldn't abandon us with these strangers, at least not without saying goodbye. Her hand instinctively reached for where the stone should be around her neck, but found nothing. He did. He left. Cam reached across her to grab something on top of a small cabinet beside the bed, and then placed the pendant in her hand. The chain was broken, and the inside of the blue stone was fractured by a bunch of tiny vein-like cracks. He said he had to go find another blue stone since yours got broken in the blast. But Kale promised to protect us. I can help him find a replacement stone. He wouldn't abandon us, she mumbled, trying to convince herself. He wouldn't leave me. He's a selfish bastard, Ari. Don't waste another thought on him, Cam urged fiercely. Then he gently put his hand on her face, making her look at him instead of the hopelessly broken stone. I'm still here, he said, looking intently into her eyes. Elu perstat. The light remains, Ari. I will always fight by your side. Just then the door opened, and the old man with the white beard walked in with a pretty blonde teenage girl stepping in behind him. He looked at Ari, happily surprised. Great, you're awake. He walked over to the side of her bed, smiling down at her, and introduced himself. Hello, Ari. I'm Dr. Aza Solomon, and this is Claudia, my assistant, he said, turning towards the blonde. Then he looked at Cam. Can you please get up, Cam? I need to examine her, he said kindly but insistently. Cam stubbornly shook his head, refusing to move, and Ari sensed his worry for her. It's all right, Cam. You can get up. My leg feels like it's fallen asleep anyway. His face crumpled in a pained expression, and she felt him struggle with a tangle of emotions. His reaction made her start to panic. What? She looked to the doctor and Claudia, and she saw only pity in their eyes. What is it? Tell me, she begged. I can only speed up the healing process. I can't regenerate missing bone and tissue, the doctor said apologetically. No, she said in denial, unwilling to believe his words and what they implied. It wasn't true. She would prove it. She pushed Cam away, and he reluctantly got off her and stood beside the bed. Ari kept her eyes on the pained expression on his face as she sat up. Then she slowly looked down at the white blanket that was covering her up to her waist. Her mind refused to comprehend what she was seeing, refused to believe it. It felt like all the air got sucked out of the room as she started to hyperventilate. The blanket wasn't laying right. It was wrong, so very wrong. She violently flipped the blanket away, revealing that her right foot, shin, and knee weren't there. Gone. There was nothing below, just above where her kneecap had been. This isn't real. This can't be real. Where's my leg? She yelled, becoming hysterical. Cam, what happened to my leg? She turned to him, desperately grabbing onto his hand, her eyes pleading for him to tell her this was all a cruel joke and make it all go away. I'm so sorry, he whispered wretchedly as he held her hand tightly between his. You're very lucky to be alive at all, Ari, Claudia said, stepping closer to the bed. Ari began incessantly shaking her head in denial as her mouth silently mouthing the words, No, 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 no. It was all too much. Kale's abandonment, her leg. She felt herself spinning out of control. She could barely breathe. and she could see in her periphery the other's radiant energy pulse brighter and brighter the more agitated and upset she became. The doctor took something out of the cabinet beside the bed and injected it into her IV. Then the blessed relief of oblivion overtook her, and she fell back down into darkness. Just clean up here. Oh, man. ER, emotional reading. Subscribe. As Ari eased back into unconsciousness and his vision slowly went back to normal, Cam gently laid down her hand onto the bed. That was exactly the reaction he was trying to prevent by being with her when she woke up. The doc had said that even though her body was healed, there was a chance that her mind had been damaged. The longer she was unconscious, the greater the possibility she wouldn't be the same Ari when she woke up, if she woke up at all. But she did, and she was still his sweet, beautiful pipes. But her horror and denial tore him to shreds. It was still hard to believe that she was even alive after what had happened to her. After the explosion, it had been like a nightmare he couldn't wake from. She had looked like a victim out of a really macabre slasher flick. He'd be haunted by that for the rest of his life. And not just because of the gore, but because he thought he had lost her. And the only reason this happened to her was because she had saved his, Kale's, and Tober's lives. And what did they do to repay her selfless sacrifice? They abandoned her like effing cowards. Cam decided long ago, when he had seen what his mom had gone through, that he wasn't going to be the kind of man that splits when things got tough. He would remain and stand strong. That's what you did for people you loved. He turned the anger and frustration he was feeling on the doc and Claudia. "You're very lucky to be alive at all, Ari," he mimicked Claudia in a falsetto. "She doesn't want to hear that right now. She just found out that part of her body is missing. How would you feel if you woke up and all of a sudden your leg was gone? Would you want to hear that? No, you'd be flipping out about how much your life has dramatically changed." Then he turned to the doc. "I was going to break it to her easily, give her a chance to wrap her mind around it, not painfully shove it in her face like ripping off a Band-Aid." But instead of rising up to argue with him, the doc just looked at him in understanding and said calmly, "No matter how you told her, it was going to be traumatic, Cam. Trust me, it's better to get it over with and give her time to adjust." "Do you call that adjusting? You had to knock her out." And the next time she wakes up, it won't be such a shock. I'll be there to help calm her," Claudia said soothingly. "And how will you do that? She doesn't even know you," Cam asked skeptically. "It's kind of what I do. I can emit sound waves at certain hertz levels that promotes calmness and healing." "Well, Cam sputtered and his eyes narrowed, not sure how to take that information. "That's weird." But before she could come back with a retort, the doc said, "Gordon said that as soon as Ari woke up, he wanted to meet with you." He noticed Cam looked worriedly down at Ari. "You can't do any more for her right now, Cam. She'll be out for a couple hours." The doc was right. He couldn't do anything for her while she slept, so he might as well do some reconnaissance on the place and asses, and assess their new situation. See what these people were really like. "Fine. Where is he?" "Claudia will take you up to his office." He nodded and then leaned down and whispered in Ari's ear that he'd be right back. Then he stood back up and followed Claudia out the door. This was the first time he'd left the infirmary since they got there. It had been dark and hectic when they arrived, so he didn't get a chance to get a good look at the place. Then he refused to leave Ari's side, so he had slept in one of the empty beds, used the infirmary's bathroom and shower, and someone would bring him food at meal times. They were on the ground level of what looked like a mix between a turn-of-the-century Spanish hotel and an old industrial factory. There were 4 levels, and all the walls were old, exposed brick. In the part of the building they were in, the different rooms were arranged around a large inner courtyard that was underneath a high glass roof that let in a flood of natural light. In the middle of the courtyard, there was a 3-tiered fountain surrounded by various potted plants and tables and chairs, where a few people were eating and looking at him curiously as he and Claudia walked by. It was weird to It was weird for Cam to think they were all progenies with abilities. Now that his anger had dissipated some, he felt bad about taking it out on Claudia. She was just trying to help, and he had to admit she was pretty hot. So he caught up and matched stride with her, which wasn't hard since she only came up to about his shoulder. Sorry about yelling at you like that. It's all right. I understand why you were upset, she said as she led him to a black iron staircase and started walking up. It's hard when someone you cares about gets hurt. Bit of an understatement, but, whatevs, he thought sarcastically. They walked up to the second level. Just so as you know, your room is on the third level where the rest of the boys are, and Ari's room is on the fourth level with me and the other girls, she said, pointing up to the levels above them. Then they walked down a hallway that led to another walkway around a smaller courtyard, where a kid was practicing skateboard tricks. So, your ability, how do you emit these healing sound waves? Do you purr like a cat? Make whale sounds? He asked, grinning down at her. Not quite, she said, rolling her eyes and looking at him like he was being dumb. But the smirk she was trying to hide gave her away. She digs me. He had to admit that the extra pounds of muscle he put on while staying at Artemir really helped his game. They came up to a door with a frosted glass panel that had an image of a tree with its branches and roots intertwined, painted in gold. Claudia knocked on the door and waved at the camera lens that was embedded in the wall next to it, and the door clicked open on its own. She woke up, Claudia said brightly to the old man behind the desk. He had shoulder-length graying hair and a beard with a fancy mustache that made him look like a mix between an old hippie and a Don Quixote. Quixote. You try it. His blue eyes lit up and he smiled. That's excellent news. Thank you, Claudia, he said, nodding to her as he put down a gross-looking green shake and got up from behind his desk and walked towards them. She nodded back and then left, closing the door behind her. Reinhold was wearing a suit vest over an Oxford shirt and jeans. This was not how Cam thought the infamous Gordon Reinhold would look like. He pictured him more sinister and villain-like, not a hipster grandpa. Hello, Cam. Welcome to Scion's Keep, he said, holding out his hand for him to shake. Cam kept his hands in his pockets. How are you going to keep her safe from the suits? Cam asked seriously, wanting to get straight to the point. Fair enough, Reinhold said, tilting his head in concession and putting his hand back down. Please, sit, he said, motioning towards a high-backed swivel chair across from his desk. Cam grudgingly sat down and was surprised at how comfortable it was. This building is well protected, I assure you, Reinhold said as he sat down behind his desk. How is it protected? Because we were just with a guy who said he could protect her. You see how well that turned out. The suits, as you call them, are not able to detect our enhanced energy fields here. I have the ability to create a protective field around the building. So between that and the state-of-the-art security systems, radar jammers, and signal scramblers, this building is virtually invisible to the outside world. Sweet baby Jesus, you can make a freaking force field? That's so flippin' cool, Cam thought. But then something occurred to him. Hold up. If there's a force field around this place, does that mean this is some sort of culty prison? No, Cam, this is not a culty prison, he said patiently. All the field does is prevent anyone from picking up on our enhanced energy fields. You and Ari are free to leave whenever you want. The reason I started all this was because I wanted to create a safe haven where progenies could live and thrive without fear. That's all. Then why did you send Pyro Joe to kidnap Ari back in Chicago? Reinhold looked confused for a second, but then nodded in comprehension. Ah, yes. Alvaro told me Ari said something like that. We never sent Zachary after her. He said that you sent him to fetch Ari because you were tired of waiting, and that he'd take her to you whether she liked it or not. Reinhold sighed sadly and shook his head. It was all lies. I don't know why Zachary would do something like that, but he's always been troubled. You see, he had a rough start in life. His mother died during childbirth, and his father essentially blamed him for her death, and was very physically and mentally abusive. Zachary's ability didn't manifest until he reached his teens, and by the time we found out about him, the damage had already been done. He ended up accidentally burning his house down, with his father still in it. We reached out to him as a place of refuge and rehabilitation, pulling some strings and making a deal with the Boston juvenile court system. He had a hard time fitting in here, and stayed with us for about 6 months before he took off on his own. That was almost 2 years ago. We haven't seen or been able to have any contact with him since. I saw him with the suits in New York. I thought they had gotten to him after Chicago, but I guess it was before, Cam said thoughtfully, realizing they'd gotten Reinhold and his crew all wrong. That's unfortunate, Reinhold said, sounding genuinely remorseful. Then someone knocked on the door and his eyes glanced at his computer monitor. Cam, there's someone here that I think you should meet, he said, getting up and walking to the door. It's been long overdue. Cam swiveled around in his chair just in time to see the door open to a man he'd never thought he'd see face to face. What the hell? Cam stood up, stunned into silence at the sight of his father. He knew it was him because he had seen pictures. He'd found them in an old shoebox under his mom's bed one day when he'd been playing hide and seek. The man was about 20 years older now than he was in the pictures, but it was definitely him. Cam looked more like him than he cared to admit. This was the man who had abandoned him and his mother before he was born, and all the years of repressed anger and resentment began boiling up within him. I'll leave you two to it, Reinhold said as he made a quick exit and closed the door behind him. Miles looked at Cam like he couldn't believe this was finally happening, like he was happy to see him. There were even tears forming in his eyes, which only made Cam want to punch him in the face. Hi, son, Miles said, breaking the tense silence. You're not allowed to call me that, Cam said stonily. You gave up that right a long time ago. Milo, listen. No! Cam interrupted, stepping up to him threateningly. That was Mom's name for me, because she couldn't stand calling me the same name as my absentee asshole father. How dare you come in here like you're happy to see me? What kept you away for the past 17 years, huh? I only left to keep you and your mother safe. Safe? She died slipping on some stupid ice while walking from the parking lot to her second job that she wouldn't have had to have if you were around. She died because of you, he said, pointing his finger accusingly at Miles' chest. And he saw the shadow of deep regret and pain in his eyes. Cam couldn't stand to even look at him, so he turned around angrily and stepped away, before he really did punch him. Your mother was the love of my life, Miles said to Cam's back, and I loved you before you were even born. It killed me to leave you guys behind, but I had accidentally stumbled onto some classified... Chill, babies. But I had accidentally stumbled onto some classified documents. Something about a secret organization searching for people with supernatural abilities. They considered them the progeny of superior alien races. At first, I thought it was all some kind of joke, or maybe these people were a bunch of nutty conspiracy theorists. But the deeper I went, the scarier it got. These people were what was left over from the Nazi eugenics program, and they've been able to move onto the radar, erasing any sign of their existence by infiltrating governments and powerful global industries and hacking into their systems. They've been collecting and experimenting on progenies for a long time. They have satellites orbiting around the world, searching for readings of energy bursts the progenies sometimes put off when they use their abilities. You'd think if these people were so good at moving under the radar, they'd have better firewalls on their classified information, Cam said skeptically. Miles nodded. They do. The fact that I was able to get past those supposedly unhackable firewalls is what alerted them to my existence. I'd always just thought I had a knack with technology, that I was just one of those people who took to it naturally. But as I got older, I realized I was able to do things other people weren't able to do. And what's that? In a sense, I can see into the inner workings of and communicate with technology. What? Cam asked, narrowing his eyes in confusion. I guess you could say that I'm sort of a glorified programmer and hacker. Coding is like a language that I was just born knowing and understanding. Anyway, from reading through some of their documents and research, I was able to find out what I was, and that there was a good possibility that I'd pass down the progeny gene to you. As I was reading, they must have realized that I had gotten in, and they started shutting things down and kicking me out of systems. I became paranoid and started making preparations. Barely a week after the hack, I noticed black cars following me to work. They were coming for me, and I knew I had to lead them away from you and your mother. So I ran, going deep underground and off the grid, not staying in one place long enough for them to find me. Cam spun back around. If you figured I'd be a progeny too, why didn't you take us with you? It's easier for one person to disappear than a family of 3. It was me they wanted, and there was also a chance you wouldn't be a progeny at all. I wanted you both to have a chance at a normal life, not having to bounce from place to place every couple days. You should have at least told Mom. Let her know why you had to leave. The less she knew, the safer she'd be. It tore me apart leaving you two behind. But I did what I had to do to protect my family, Miles said, looking into Cam's eyes and pleading for him to understand. I managed to figure out a way to secretly keep tabs on you both. I was able to remotely watch you grow up. I was devastated when I realized Rory still held out hope that I'd come back. What made you think that? Cam spat out acidly. The fact that she stayed in New Hampshire, that she kept the last name Baldwin, and that she still named you Miles. She didn't call you Milo to spite me. That was the name we already agreed to call you. And when I found out Rory died, it broke me, he said, his voice choked up with emotion. But then he took a deep breath and pressed on. I lost track of you for a bit after your grandmother died, but then I found your parkour videos. You could do some amazing stuff, kiddo. I'm impressed. Cam couldn't help the spike of pride he felt at Miles' praise, but he quickly tamped it down. He didn't know how he felt about any of this. The man he'd always thought had abandoned him and his mother had really gone on the run from the suits to protect them. He still felt angry at him for not being around, but now it wasn't as justified, which made him frustrated and confused. I learned how to be more careful when hacking into their systems, gaining access by piggybacking on other programs and making it harder for Anaxmander when I could, but only every once in a while, and not for very long, or they'd pick up on my presence. When they started coming after you and saying you and that girl were terrorists, I found a way to crash their system, limiting their resources and making it impossible for them to find you. At least for a little while. During the chaos, I went to go find you before they could, but Reinhold was able to find me first, and told me that Elvira had some kind of vision that you'd come to Scion's Keep. So over the past 9 months or so, I've been here helping out, waiting for you to arrive. Ever since you got here, we've been drafting out a robotic prosthesis for your friend. A robotic prosthesis? They're going to make her into a flipping cyborg? That's so freaking awesome. But Cam hid his excitement behind the wall he'd built between himself and his father. Miles wasn't the total asshat he'd always thought, but Cam still couldn't bring himself to tear down the wall yet. There were too many years of resentment to get over. She's not my friend, he said stiffly. Ari's my family. And he tried to tell Miles with his eyes that he didn't consider him that yet. Miles nodded, then he looked at Cam hopefully. Do you want to see what we've come up with so far? Yes, I do, he screamed in his head. Sure, why not? I got nothing better to do, he said like he couldn't care less. Miles smiled, then led him through the building. The place was a humongous L shape, where the living quarters were in the short part, and everything else was in the long part. Miles led him down hallways and up a glass elevator to the 3rd floor, where they finally came to a set of double doors. Miles put his hand on a high-tech fingerprint scanner, and the doors opened up to the coolest, most epic, comic book-esque superhero lab Cam had ever seen. "I can add your prints to the database if you want to help out around the lab," Miles tossed out. "Yes," Cam said in awe, greedily taking in all the epic coolness around him. "Yes, I would like that very much." And that was chapter 24. And we're at 30 minutes, so we'll cut it here. And I might have to switch around the animals and then go on to chapter 25. Peace.